morning. Several years ago, when I was a youth leader in the local parish, and four of us, four young adults, were leading a youth group in one of the churches. Fairly normal youth group, nice bunch of kids, mainly from the church, a few of their friends from school, and yeah, we did the usual things that youth groups do. All was going well and normal until one Friday night when this group of boys, early mid-teenage boys, six or seven of them, turned up. They didn't come into the youth group. They wouldn't. We invited them in. They hung around outside and they were kind of carrying on a bit. And so a couple of us went out and engaged with them for a while. And then they shot off and went around. They often just roamed the streets on Friday and Saturday nights, I think. Anyway, the next Friday night, they were back again. And we went out and talked to them for a bit longer, and the next week and the next week and so on. Over this time, we kind of built up a relationship and built up some trust with them, which was great. And finally, they accepted our invitation to come in and join the youth group. That in itself was a challenge. They brought a whole lot of different experiences and cultures and expectations and things in their lives. They were not really understanding of church or church culture or the message of church or any of that. And so they were quite different in many ways from the youth group kids. And so there were clashes and tensions at times, and we had to rethink a lot of stuff and not assume as much. It was going okay until one particular night. The church we're in on Sundays, they cleared all the stuff, the cross and the candles and all of that sort of stuff, microphones, and put it all away because the church building was used by a lot of activities and groups through the week. There was a main floor of the church, and then the front had a couple of steps up, and there was kind of a raised platform at the front, and there was a table probably half a metre high off the floor and several metres wide, long rather, and not very wide. And on Sundays there'd be a cloth and a candle and a cross and a Bible and communion elements on communion Sundays, and the offering elements would be there. And it was a special place anyway. So this Friday night there was a microphone stand was left out, and between a couple of activities while we were cleaning things up and preparing for the next thing, one of these guys picked up the microphone stand and got this idea to imitate his favourite rock star. And so he's dancing around singing this song and imitating this rock star and really getting into it. And people around him were clapping and laughing, and the more they clapped and laughed, the more he got into it, and it built up. And all of a sudden he jumped up onto that table and he danced along the table. He was really clever, really good. We were kind of half watching and doing what we had to do. And he's really into it. Then all of a sudden there was this booming voice from the back. This voice that said, "Get down from that now and don't disrespect this." And then went on, "You wouldn't do that in your own home. Don't do it here. What makes you think you can get away with, And we turn around and there's this elder from the church, a really big, solid bloke who at this stage was red in the face and furious look on his face, waving a cane or a stick and really threatening and really giving it to this young bloke that was dancing around on the table. He gave it to all of us, and he gave it to us leaders, and left us with a warning. I'm doing some work here, and I'll be checking in, and I'll be coming back other weeks. And if there's any more of this behaviour, there'll be trouble. Well, he left, and we were stunned. It was stunned silence. And we went up to this guy, and he was traumatised, really. He was hurt, he was shamed, he was angry, he was confused, he was shaking. And so a couple of us had to kind of walk him through it and help him to deal with this. And to try and explain to him somehow that this table at the front of the church was, some people considered it sacred and holy and a sacred space, and they saw it in different ways to him, and they were really offended when people mistreated this stuff that was considered holy. He didn't really get that. And when someone said, "Well, you wouldn't jump on your own table at home or your chairs or whatever," he said, "Of course I would. I do that. Why wouldn't you do that?" And suddenly, I guess we realised there was a different thing, a different worldview operating here. That his experience and his life was very different from other people, um, particularly in the church. The elder, the elder did what I guess many of us do in religion. He had a set of values or priorities or rules or structures or rituals or belief systems, whatever they were, and he held them in a rigid way, and he built a fence around them. And if anyone crossed that line, they were outside. If you didn't behave in a way that these rules and expectations conform to, then you were outside. You were bad. So this rigid structure he built around faith and church and God divided those who were in and those who were out, those who were good, those who were bad, those who were right, those who were wrong, those who were clean and those who were unclean. I don't want to judge that man too much. I mean, what he did wasn't right and wasn't good, but I know I've been guilty of doing those sort of things, even with that same group of boys some months later when they were really getting on my nerves. And I had the chance to actually make up for it and to work through it with one of the guys. And it led to a deeper understanding of his life and him and why he acted the way he did, which confronted me and challenged me. This is bad religion. Bad religion is when we build up our rules, when we have our doctrines, our structures, our belief systems, whatever it is, and we use them to keep people out, to define people as bad or evil or wrong or unclean or whatever language we want to use. And we're seeing that in Afghanistan right now. We're seeing that with the Taliban, this Taliban with their Sharia law, this really rigid, solid, violent rules, this narrow way of viewing Islamic faith. And anyone who is different, anyone who has a different perspective or acts differently or acts outside these rigid rules and structures that are built around their faith are not only ostracized, but often killed. And we know that many thousands of people are going to either be pushed out of the land or killed in the coming weeks and months. Some, I believe, are already getting death threats or death sentences, saying you consorted with the enemies over these last 20 years. You helped the Allies. You were in various ways on their side against us. You deserve to die. The Hazara people and other minorities are going to be excluded and pushed to the fringes and persecuted. Women are going to be oppressed again, much more so, and young girls denied education and other rights. It's a terrible situation. It's bad and horrible and evil religion. And whether it's in Islam, Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, Sikhism, whatever religion or faith, when we use the tenets of that faith and create belief systems and structures or use the rituals to exclude people and judge people and push them out, that's bad. And it harms. And it's not what God is on about. And in this passage this week, we return to Mark 7. It's a story where these religious leaders come up to Jesus and they ask him why his disciples don't ritually clean their hands before eating. And it's not about getting rid of germs and the dirt. It's about cleansing, purification. And apparently food must be washed before prepared and used. Utensils used must be cleansed, and so with your hands, so that nothing of the world, the contamination of the world, doesn't get on the food and get into you. And so these rules are about purification. If you do this, you're clean. If you don't, you're unclean. And Jesus said, what do you want about? You fellas don't obey all the rules in that kind of way. There are ways in which you transgress them and change them and interpret them and reinterpret them. You use them for your own benefit. But let me tell you, it's not what goes into your body that makes you unclean. The food you eat goes in and goes through you and comes out and goes into the sewer. It's what comes out. It's not what's in your stomach. It's what's in your heart, what's in your being. It's what comes out of you, your actions and your words and the ways in which you condemn other people and judge other people, the way in which you hoard resources, money and wealth for yourself, or use power and abuse people with that power and oppress them, the way you take advantage of powerless people, vulnerable people, widows and orphans in their case, and take on their rights, abuse their rights and take their money from them. These are the things that make people unclean truly in the eyes of God. These are the things that are evil, not forgetting to wash your hands. Rituals and that are there to help us, lead us more deeply into this presence of God. Belief systems or doctrines or beliefs around faith help us to understand God more fully and to live a life that's deeper and richer. They're not there to become rigid rules that when people disobey them out of ignorance or whatever, we use them to isolate or keep people away. Jesus is saying all are welcomed in God's place, in God's family, in the presence of God. And we should not use our religion or our politics or our family cultural rules and norms and expectations, the rules in our community organisations or the culture within our organisations, the expectations, wherever it is, we shouldn't use these things to exclude people and judge people, building fences to keep people out because they're different from us. We should knock those barriers down and find ways of bringing people together. And in a COVID-19 world, surely that's what the world needs. This kind of love which includes people and brings people in and uses the best in religion, in faith, to unite people, to bring us together into the presence of God who loves us all and wants the best for each of us and wants us to live into a deeper, richer way of being and living. That's what Jesus was on about, and that's what he's talking about here. And so in our churches or our families or our culture, our nation or whatever, when we use anything to define others and judge them and push them out, that's evil. In the light of this, I wonder how that conversation that I started with might have gone differently. If the elder had come to the door, seen this, and put his shock, his horror, his whatever away, took a deep breath, and gone up and watched this guy, and when he finished, called him down and said, "Hey, can I have a chat with you? Hey, you're pretty clever, you dance really well, you sing well, you had people really entertained, that was great. You've got a real gift." And you were dancing on that table. Let me tell you about that table. There's a special table in church on Sunday. We put a cloth, we put a cross, and reminds us of Jesus' death and resurrection, his love for all the world. We open the Bible and remember the stories of God's love for us. We light a candle that signifies the light of Christ in our lives. We put communion elements on there, bread and wine, that reminds us of Jesus' Last Supper and his body broken and his blood shed. And we eat of that and draw strength and hope from him. And we kneel before this table to do it. And then in our service, we make offering. We offer money, but also ourselves and all we can to God. And we put it on the table. When I saw you dancing on that table, I thought, here's a young man offering himself to God. His gifts, his dancing, his singing, his happiness, his ability to make people happy and to laugh. He's offering that to God. And I thought that was beautiful, the way you did that. I don't know whether you realise, but that's how I saw it. And, let me just give you some advice, though. That table is pretty special, and for many people in this church, if they saw you doing that, they'd think of it it's a sacred place and a sacred thing. They would get really upset. So it's probably best if you don't jump around on the table, But hey, if you want to talk more about this, or if I can help you in any way, or if we can talk, I'd like to hear your story a bit more. I'd like to do that. Okay. That would have been a very different way of operating. That's more in the way of Jesus. And that would have opened up relationship and embraced this young man into a new way of thinking and being. And it might have opened this elder up to hearing a worldview that he probably didn't understand or know either. And there would have been relationship, and God would have been in that. And God invites us into this way of being and thinking and living that is gracious, loving, and just. Amen.